So maybe you've thought that having a projector in your home is something reserved for the rich and famous with a home theater in a mansion. Or maybe you know a little bit more about things like ultra short throw projectors, but you've written it off for not being bright enough for your living room, or that you'd need some kind of dedicated home theater seating furniture, or that it's just too complicated for any content shorter than a movie. Well, I had a lot of those same thoughts as well. I'm Eric Welander. Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, we talk all about Apple and smart home tech, so if you're into those things, consider subscribing. Now, earlier this year, AWOL Vision reached out and wanted to send me one of their new LTV-3000 Pro ultra short throw projectors to check out for you guys on the channel with no strings attached. This video is not sponsored. And while I was skeptical at first for some of the reasons I mentioned, this product really ended up changing my thoughts not only on this projector, but the category as a whole and what it means for watching content in our smart homes. You might have heard me mention ultra short throw and wondered what that means. So if you're familiar with like a traditional projector, that's usually a long throw projector that sits way behind the screen and has a bulb in it. That's like what you see maybe at the movie theater, and it's going to then put that image on the screen across the room. Short throw projectors look pretty similar, but they can get a little bit closer to the screen. Now, ultra short throw projectors can still be mounted above the image like a sort of traditional projector, but they can also go below the screen and they can get really close to the wall and then still project a big image. And that's what the LTV-3000 Pro from AWOL Vision is. Now, when you're considering a projector, you also want to think about the projector screen the image is going on. If you get a nice projector, you really need to pair it with a nice screen. Otherwise, you're kind of throwing some money away on the nice projector. Now, screens typically come in, let's say, 100-inch, 120, and 135-inch, and up from there. And AWOL actually sells their own branded screens to go with these projectors. And they sent me one of their ALR daylight screens to check out at 100 inches, which is what fits in my living room. Speaking of that, I wanted to test out this projector by only slightly modifying my home TV setup because of course, this projector could work great in some kind of more dedicated home theater area, but I think the great part about ultra short throw is that you can put the projector really close to the wall, maybe put it on top of some existing furniture, and you don't have to completely change your living room to get a giant screen. Now, the screen AWOL sent me mounts on the wall like a picture frame and works great in my place, but if you don't have a wall to mount it on, you can get screens that expand with a motor out of some kind of case, and AWOL Vision makes those as well. They're just going to cost a little bit more money. The thing to look for with ultra short throw projectors is an ALR screen, or ambient light rejecting. It has special grooves in the screen which basically allow for the image to shine on the screen. Well, it also rejects the ambient light from the lights in your room, the sun shining through a window. And as you're thinking about which size projector screen you might want to go with and where the projector would need to be positioned in order to project onto that screen, AWOL Vision has some very helpful diagrams on the product page, which I'll link to in the description, that show you exactly the sizes and kind of where you might want to position things. So you'll be able to get a good idea of where you're probably going to put things before you actually buy it. Now, before we get into the setup, let's talk through some of the specs of this projector. This projector uses triple lasers to project over 1 billion colors. That's 107% of the Rec 2020 color spectrum, or if you've heard Apple talk about the Display P3 wide color gamut on some of their products, this supports 147% of that color gamut via the DCI P3 standard. And all of this comes at a contrast ratio of 2,500 to 1. It supports 4K at 60 Hertz with Dolby Vision, HDR10, and 10+, and it works with HDMI eARC for Dolby Atmos. For the brightness, it has 2400 ANSI lumens, ANSI lumens, and that's really the key lumen metric you want to look for in projectors. It can also do a peak of 3000 lumens for HDR content. Speaking of lumens, you might have heard that old projector style bulbs use a lot of energy and generate a lot of heat. And that's really where the triple laser projector comes in handy, because it's actually even a fraction of the standard sort of LED TV. AWOL rates this projector at 182 watts per hour, which they claim is 1/15th of an LED TV. Now, I didn't get into the details of testing this particular spec, but I thought it was interesting to call out. Another spec that AWOL Vision highlights is the f2.0 aperture on the LT-3000 Pro lens, which they say helps with some sharp focusing. Now, one spec here that you might find a little bit confusing that I've seen on a handful of websites that sell this projector like B&H Photo is that the native chip resolution is full HD, which is 1920 by 1080. But of course, it's advertised as an ultra high definition 4K projector, and it gets this 4K resolution via XPR technology with a special processor built into the projector. So it's doing some magic to sort of put a 4K image on a projector chip that's full HD. I don't fully understand all of the optical science behind how this is actually working, but all I can say is when I look at the image, it's incredibly sharp, and it looks to me like a 4K image. And yes, if you go get a 4K 98-inch TV, it's probably going to be a little bit more tack sharp than the projected image, but I think that there's just still something so cinematic and fun about having a projected image on the screen that you don't get with a massive TV. Now, we'll talk more about my experience of using this projector, but first, let's get to the setup. You'll first want to unbox and set up the projector, and then you can just shine it on the blank wall where you plan to put the screen. This projector does come with a Fire TV stick, which you can actually plug into a dedicated space inside of the projector. There's even a spot there for charging the Fire TV stick, but I prefer to use Apple TV instead. So what's really amazing about this setup is that you don't have to use the Fire TV stick at all. And what that also means is when you compare this to a TV, a lot of TVs you buy, or basically every TV you buy these days, is full of all kinds of bloatware, and the TV wants you to use their apps. So they'll put their apps with big letters on their remote. If you're like me, you want to use those apps or other apps on something like your Apple TV, not necessarily the TV's built-in apps. And with this, the projector's menus and settings are just about the picture settings and details, and they've sort of moved all of their out-of-the-box streaming to the Fire TV stick. Now, the flip side of that, of course, is that there's no HomeKit integration. So some of those smart TVs will integrate directly with Apple Home via a HomeKit compatible TV. And there's also no AirPlay built in as well. So you lose a little bit of that functionality, but I think it's a net win overall, especially if you're connecting an Apple TV, which has a lot of that built in already. Now, once you have your projector set up and running, and maybe a handful of the other set-top boxes or whatever connected to it, then you want to build the screen. Now, if you're doing a wall-mounted screen like mine, keep in mind this is a time-consuming process. Plan for it to take a whole morning or a whole afternoon, and you'll also want to have someone nearby who can help you lift the screen as you put it on the wall, because this is definitely a two-person job. And the manual also isn't the clearest I've ever experienced for assembling this kind of thing, so you want to pay close attention to all the details as you're putting the different pieces together. But all that said, it's not rocket science. You're just building a metal frame and stretching this special screen material over that metal frame. And AWOL provides basically everything you need. They give you a tarp, which you can then build the screen on top of, so it's not getting dirt or anything from your existing floor. And they also even give you gloves to handle the screen and a screwdriver. So you should be pretty set there, except for measuring tape and other things for actually mounting it to the wall. Editor Eric here, and I also want to mention the tube that the projector screen comes in, if you have small children, makes for a very fun tunnel for vehicles and all kinds of other toys. Through this whole process, you really want to try to avoid touching the actual screen because it has all those little grooves. It's just a very special piece of material, and also pay attention to where it shows you to put the direction of the screen up or down as you build it. Now, once you have the screen on the wall, you want to make sure that your projector lines up perfectly with the screen. And the projector does have some software tools which can help with just tweaking the details of this. And you also have 4 rubber feet on the bottom of the projector to sort of adjust the tipping of it to get just the right keystoning you need to get a nice square image on your frame. So I've been using this projector for about a month now and about 3 weeks with the screen up. And yes, of course, a projector is going to have some fan noise, but in my experience, you don't notice it. And it's actually encouraged us to watch more movies as a family. We have a Sunday evening movie night with the kids where we'll put on a movie we can all watch together as a family. And it's just way more fun than doing that on a 67-inch TV like this replaced. And my wife and I tend to spend some of our date nights during the week going through various TV shows on streaming services, and this just gives those more cinematic TV shows a real movie-like feel to them. The other thing I was concerned about this is, what about quick viewing, where maybe you could quickly turn on the TV to watch something? Like when I'm working remote at home, I can, turn on some kind of YouTube video or something else quick during a lunch break. Well, I was worried that the projector would take so long to start up and warm up that you wouldn't really get that. But the startup is very quick, about as fast as any TV I've experienced. Editor Eric here, and I just wanted to quickly clarify that there's some magenta and banding in some of these images, and that is not at all what I see from the projector in person. So I did my best to minimize or change different camera settings, different cameras, different other things so that you didn't see it. But unfortunately, some of the footage still shows it a little bit. Now, speaking of speed, another thing you might be curious about is gaming. Of course, no one's going to buy a projector to do competitive multiplayer online games where milliseconds of response time really matter, but it does have an 8 millisecond response rate for its sort of intelligent gaming mode. Now, I am the furthest thing from an elite or competitive gamer, but playing Formula 1 F1 2023 on my Xbox Series X at 4K on this projector, it looked great and felt great. I didn't feel any kind of latency between the controller and what happened on the screen. I could see how having a big screen could be a really cool thing for in-person multiplayer, maybe with something like Madden or Mario Kart or other sports games. As speaking of sports, it's also great for just watching sports on TV. If you've done any research before watching this particular review on AWOL Vision projectors, you've probably realized I've left out a very critical and important feature, which is that this supports 3D movies. And yes, the projector does come with 2 pairs of 3D glasses in the box. Just keep in mind that the Apple TV, like I use, does not support 3D playback, at least at this time. Let's be real, this is not a feature I really care about using at all, and I think there's plenty of other people out there like me, but the advantage is you don't have to give up your 3D Blu-ray player and disc collection if you want to get a projector like this. It does support 3D movies. Let's go through some of the downsides of the experience that you should be aware of. First is the mounting height or location of the projector, of course, matters a lot to the size and location of your screen. So you might need to really play with different variables of the furniture you're using, or like how high off the furniture it is, where you're mounting it. And related to that, when this projector gets bumped by someone, you'll need to put it back basically right where it was before so that you can get that same image. So I've used some gaff tape on either side of the little crate that my projector sits on, and that helps me sort of make sure I can get it right back to the place when my cats or my kids bump the projector. But to be fair, depending on where it actually ends up being in your room, it might not get bumped all that much. Like, this hasn't been that much of a problem for me so far. Now, speaking of these details, To fill the screen, there can be a little bit of unprojected area around the screen, which then kind of has this light glow to it as the projector shows black in those areas. And so depending on how and where your projector is showing the image, you might just see like a little bit of a splash of color right above it or beside it. Now, do keep in mind that I find when you restart the projector, it seems to do a little bit of fine-tuning the calibration depending on the settings you have. So if you've been moving the projector around and something's still just a hair off, maybe just restart the projector. It'll re-trigger that process, and whatever that like little fringe of color somewhere will go away. And as I mentioned earlier, this projector does not support Apple's HomeKit, but it does integrate with Control4, and via that, Google and Amazon smart home systems. So if you have a Control4 system in your home, which is kind of a high-end, fully installed system to manage a smart home, then you can integrate this right in with Control4. All that said, I think the pros still far outweigh the cons. This thing has changed the way I think about watching a movie or any kind of streaming service. Of course, I have an Apple Vision Pro here, and yes, the home theater experience there is amazing, but I can't share that with other people I'm right in the same room with like I can with a projector. And if you're interested in getting one of these for yourself, I'll have links in the description below. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video linked somewhere here on the screen.